one thing which really can screw you up, and even you can get frostbites, is when your feet get wet, and not from the outside. So today you will learn how to avoid that. As I'm really not an expert at all in this technique of using vapor barrier socks, I reached out to Colin Haley. He is a really badass climber, alpinist. He spent half a year in Patagonia. He climbed tons in Alaska, impressive things there. And we meet always in Chamonix during the winter season to climb a little bit together. So if you like this episode or the series, please subscribe and leave a like. That helps us a lot. So now let's hear all about vapor barrier socks from Colin Haley. Hey Colin, now I'm really interested to hear all about vapor barrier socks. And so let's start. What is the principle like of this system?
Yeah, vapor barrier socks are socks that block water from moving through them, either liquid water or vapor water. And they block in either directions. And the purpose of a vapor barrier sock is to keep the insulation of your foot dry. So it's to keep your main sock dry, it's to keep your boot dry, so that sweat from your foot does not make your insulation wet and therefore make your boots much colder.
So what is a typical day then in the mountains when you choose to use this?
I think on a lot of day climbs in the mountains, you wouldn't bother using vapor barrier socks, because if you're just going out for 12 hours, maybe your feet get a little bit sweaty and your socks and your boots get a little bit wet, but it's not going to make a big difference in your overall experience that day. But in places where it's really cold and you're doing very long climbs, especially multi-day climbs, then it can make a big difference, because each day that you're out climbing, your feet are sweating, and it's typical that you're going to have an issue that at the bivvy, your boots are a little bit wet, and the next morning they're freezing cold and things like that. And so on a multi-day climb, the vapor barrier socks are very useful, because only a tiny part of your total foot insulation will get wet during the day, and that part is easy to dry, and so your boots will generally stay dry day after day, which for being warm in really cold places is very important.
Okay, cool. So what is then the system of like socks and vapor barrier socks and shoes and this system?
People can do it in different ways, but the typical system is to wear a very thin liner sock on top of your foot. This one is very thin and it's purely synthetic, which helps it dry very fast.
So this is next to skin?
Yeah. And then on top of a very thin liner sock, you wear the vapor barrier sock. This is like a classic example.
Yeah.
And then on top of the vapor barrier sock, you wear some sort of thicker sock that's more for insulation. And then your boot on top of that. So the idea is that this thin liner sock will get wet from your sweat, and the inside of the vapor barrier sock will be wet, but your main sock stays dry and your boots stay dry.
And the main sock and the boots are the layers which really keeps the warmth. This kind of...
Yeah. Having your socks and boots dry, they're much better insulators than if they're wet. And so the purpose of the system is to keep the vast majority of the insulation on your feet dry and therefore warmer.
So during the day now you do your activity, so this thin layer gets wet and this is not uncomfortable?
Yeah, the thing is, like, people kind of, when they hear about vapor barrier socks, they imagine that it just must be horrendously wet inside. But the reality is that once your foot kind of saturates the environment around it, it stops sweating. So when you're using vapor barrier socks, your foot ends up being a little bit damp the whole day, but it's not just in a pool of water. It's not just soaking.
Because that is kind of, I think, the picture a lot of people have in their mind.
Yeah,
kind of,
no, it's not. It's like you don't, when you take your socks off and you take the liner sock off, it's not like you have raisin toes.
Okay.
It's like your feet are damp for sure, but they're not soaking wet.
Cool, that's good. So, and then you arrive at the camp?
Yeah, you get to your bivvy, set up your tent, all that, get inside, take off your boots, take off your main insulation sock. All that is still dry, assuming your gaiter worked and everything. And then you take off the vapor barrier sock, turn it inside out, and then take off the very thin liner sock, maybe hang it from the inside of the tent or put it on your chest or something. And like this dries out extremely quickly, the vapor barrier sock, because it's a material that doesn't really absorb any water. And the liner sock, if it's very thin and purely synthetic, also dries very quickly.
Cool. That's definitely, yeah, super helpful. Now, just to finish off, like, what are the different systems from this very cheap one here to like some special one?
So here I have 3 different examples. One is like a cheap grocery bag, like a produce bag. One is a typical vapor barrier sock that anyone can buy. This is like the Rab one. This is made out of coated nylon, very simple. And then this here is like a special vapor barrier sock that I got custom made. And basically, I'll kind of go in this order. A simple plastic bag is a total vapor barrier, and it's very lightweight, and it's very cheap. The biggest downside is that they tend to be very slippery. They're like
And
the
they break
slipperiest
super
system.
easy.
Yeah, and they're not super durable.
Yeah.
Especially these biodegradable ones break fairly easily. A vapor barrier sock that I've actually used quite a bit is these Rab ones. They're also not that expensive, maybe like $20 or $30 or something like that. The biggest downside to this is that coated nylon is a material that doesn't stretch at all, like most waterproof materials. And so, you know, socks are typically made out of knitted materials that stretch, because when you pull it on your foot, it has to be very stretchy to be able to get on your foot and still have a nice form fit. This, because the material doesn't stretch, it has to have a very baggy fit, and so it ends up being kind of this not nice fit on your foot. And it's not the end of the world. You put your main sock on top of it and it all gets crunched down and it's fine.
So you didn't experience crazy blister?
No.
Okay.
It's all right. But the best one that I have for sure is this custom pair of vapor barrier socks. And what makes them really good is that this material is fairly sticky, so it's not as slippery as the coated nylon. And also, this is a material that is actually stretchy, despite the fact that it's a total vapor barrier. And so these are actually a pretty good form fit on my foot, and they're not so slippery. So these are kind of the ultimate vapor barrier socks that I have, but unfortunately, you can't just go out and buy these. Hopefully, someday that'll be the case.
Perfect. Hey, thank you. I think that gives me all the information, and I definitely will try it out.
Cool.
Wow, that was really interesting and in a way eye-opening, because I think many out there, me including, think that if we use a system like this, our feet just get really wet over time. But actually that seems not to be the case, because we reach this saturated level and then it seems to be okay. So I will try this, and I'm really curious to hear from you if you tried it or you experienced it or already use it, what you think about it and where you use it. Please leave that in the comment and share your knowledge with us. And as well, remember, the link to the products Colin mentioned here, at least the ones who are available, you will find in the show notes. See you in the next one.